What's up, people? Joe Winko here, your favorite Hawaiian guy, and here's my next episode of Joe Winko Talk. So, before I get to what I'm going to be talking about, I just want to announce that it's finally October. Well, it's actually been October for quite a while, but it's my favorite month of the year because of this, because of the candy corn. I honestly have to have this stuff like every single October, every single year, really. I mean, it just wouldn't be October without candy corn, really. Even though I don't really like it so much anymore, I mean, depends on what mood I'm in. Every now and then I do love it, and every now and then I just don't feel like touching the stuff at all. Usually it's not until after the holidays when I finally finish eating all of it. The Halloween holidays, that's what I mean. But yeah, I absolutely love candy corn, and you guys should know I have to have my candy corn every October, so yeah. Anyhow, let me get to what I'm going to be talking about. Now, this is going to be a very gloomy and very morbid episode of Joe Winko Talk. Nothing X-rated and nothing quite about myself dying, but it is going to be really gloomy, really morbid, and kind of creepy. You guys might not think of me as the same person after watching this episode because I'm going to be saying some pretty harsh stuff and some pretty sinister stuff, really. Nothing extremely bad, but you guys might get a tad bit freaked out by some of the stuff I talk about, really, because I'm going to be showing my heartless and anger side in this episode of Joe Winko Talk. And I truly do believe that everyone has a mean and vicious side to all of them, but you guys might get a tad bit freaked out because of this. So it's just a heads up, really. Those of you who've seen the post that I made on Facebook and on Twitter would know exactly what this video is going to be about. And if you guys seen my Maniac in Miami episode of Joe Winko Talk, I'd recommend you guys watch that first to get some backstory behind what exactly happened earlier with all this, because this is a continuation of that. But in case you guys haven't seen it, basically what was going on was year 2020 was a very rough year in my life. I was really scared of coronavirus, and I was living with my adoptive dad's brothers who weren't taking coronavirus seriously. They kept having friends over. I even overheard one of them talking about how coronavirus isn't real, and they weren't wearing masks, and they basically just weren't taking it seriously. That's exactly what they were doing. They were still going out, inviting friends over, and it was awful because I was actually living with them at that time in Clearwater, Florida. Now, the reason why I was worried about coronavirus is because I'm actually at high risk of dying of coronavirus because of my type 1 diabetes. So during that whole time, I was completely miserable, and I literally felt fearful for my life, honestly, because these guys were being idiots, not taking COVID seriously, and here I am living in the same house with them at high risk. So I was thinking, what can I do and what am I going to do? Because I couldn't go to live anywhere else. I mean, eventually that is exactly what happened. You guys see where I'm at right now. But at that time, that didn't seem plausible at all, really. And this is basically my autism mind that made me think of this. I thought that I need to get my adoptive dad's brothers to go away, and I felt like it's going to take something supernatural to make them go away. Because the thing about where I was living at the time in 2020, me and my adoptive dad's brothers, neither of us owned that house we were living in. It actually belonged to one of my other adoptive dad's relatives up in Wisconsin. So they couldn't kick me out of the house, and I couldn't kick them out of the house. not directly at least. So basically I started researching online how to do witchcraft spells to keep them away and to make them go away. And that's basically how I got into all the witchcraft stuff. It was in 2020. I was trying to get rid of my adoptive dad's brothers and make them go away. Later on in 2020, I ended up joining a vaccine trial where I got the COVID vaccine. I didn't know whether I got the vaccine or the placebo, but I figured it was the real vaccine because I ended up having antibodies against coronavirus in my blood, and it actually was the real vaccine. I didn't find that out till much, much later. However, even then, I still didn't feel safe around my adoptive dad's brothers. They didn't want me living in that house at the time, and I was casting spells on them to make them go away, and the spells actually were working. They were working, but they weren't working as good as I hoped for them to. So instead, what I ended up doing was going online and trying to find someone else to stay with instead. And that's how I encountered Damien, the guy I talked about in my Maniac in Miami episode of Joe Winko Talk. And he came, picked me up, took me back to his place. We didn't spend that much time together, and he lived quite a distance from me. And as I explained in my Maniac in Miami episode of Joe Winko Talk, Damien snapped on me. He didn't want me to stay there with him anymore. I was trying to tell him, oh, why can't I stay longer? And he was like, no, I want to send you home. And he ended up snapping and tried lunging me off a balcony, throwing me off a balcony. But luckily I didn't go over the railing because I caught myself in time. And after that, he basically slammed the door behind me and kicked me out of his apartment. I was stranded down there, so I called my grandmother. She sent an Uber to come pick me up and take me back to Clearwater. That's basically what I explained in my Maniac in Miami episode of Joe Winko Talk. However, there was one thing that I changed in that video. Now, this man didn't actually live in Miami like I was talking about in my Maniac in Miami episode of Joe Winko Talk. Damien actually lived in Fort Myers, Florida, which is still quite a distance from Clearwater, but not as far as Miami. And you guys may be wondering, why did you say that he lived in Miami back then? Well, the reason why is because that was a pretty serious thing that happened. He grabbed me by the neck and tried lunging me over the balcony of his apartment. I didn't fall over. I didn't go over the railing because I caught myself in time. Literally, he almost murdered me. That's literally exactly what he almost done. And I didn't want to go to the police at all because I know how cops are. I had bad stuff happen to me before, tried reporting it to the police before, and they honestly, most of the time, they do not do anything for you, especially if you're a man. That's how it is in the USA. That all happened in late November of year 2020, and I remember I was really freaked out at first, but after a while I kept thinking about what Damien did, how he tried lunging me off the balcony, and I was pissed off, and I honestly wanted revenge, really. I wanted him to pay for what he did, because that was not okay. I mean, things were going bad for me already, being stuck with my adoptive dad's brothers back then. But then I end up meeting this psycho guy who tries lunging me off a balcony, and I was pissed off, and I wanted him to die. I'm not gonna lie, I seriously wanted him to die. And don't worry, I wasn't gonna go down there and kill him or anything. But I was definitely tempted, I can tell you guys that. But I was pissed off, and I did my episode of Joe Winko Talk about that. I said that he was from Miami instead of Fort Myers because I didn't want him to... I was just worried that a bunch of bad stuff would have happened if I said exactly where he lived, because then he would have... I mean, I wasn't afraid of him, but I just didn't want to go through that. I was already stressed out enough with everything that was going on at that time. And I have a lot of witch friends online because when I started posting online about how to do spells to make my adoptive dad's brothers go away, a lot of witches were talking to me, and a lot of them felt sorry for me. And by witches, I mean a lot of these people who are practicing witchcraft like I do. And when I told them about the crazy guy who tried lunging me off the balcony, they got really pissed off right along with me because they already knew that I was in a bad situation. And then for someone to come along, say, oh, you can come stay with me. Oh, you can come live with me for a little while to get away from your adoptive dad's brothers. And then all of a sudden pull a 360 and not only pull a 360 and say you have to leave, but also try lunging me off the balcony. They were really pissed off about that, really. So they kept asking me, send me a picture of this guy. I want to cast a spell on him. That's what they were all saying, and I did not hesitate. I sent every single one of my witch friends who asked me, because there are multiple ones, they said, we're going to cast a spell on him. We're going to get even with him. I did not hesitate. I was like, here's his picture, and I just sent it out to all of them. And like they all had his picture, and I told them, don't post it anywhere, but there's his picture. And they all told me that they were going to be casting spells on him to get even with him. And I wanted to cast spells on him too, because I was pissed off about what he did. That was back in November and December of 2020. Fast forward to February of 2021, you guys may remember seeing these in a video I posted way back then. These, the Death Note books. Now, this was actually a gift from my grandmother because she knew that I was practicing witchcraft. She knew I was trying to cast spells on my adoptive dad's brothers. To her, it was kind of a joke, really. I mean, all these spells I was casting on my adoptive dad's brothers, really. I mean, that's what it seemed like to her. And she was just trying to play along with it, and she got me these. That's mainly what she got me them for, because me and my grandmother, my adoptive mom's mother, we have a relationship like that, really. And she told me, Joe, you could just write their names in these Death Note books and they'll cause them to die, and then you'll be safe from coronavirus because they won't be alive anymore. Which is exactly what I've been doing. I wrote their names in, well, she got me 2 of these books. I wrote their names in the books like many times. I remember back in 2021, I used to just write their names in the books over and over and over again, just hoping that they never come back. But then eventually, my adoptive dad's brothers were not the only people I started writing in these books. I started writing more people's names in these books because I talk to a lot of guys online, and to be completely honest with you guys, 95% of the time, I do not get along with them at all. Gay guys who I talk to online, I mean, I'm gay myself, but the other gay guys who I talk to online, 95% of the time, I do not get along with them, and a lot of times things end up going really wrong because for some reason I have a tendency to attract like literally the scum of the earth sometimes. Definitely not always, but a lot of times, yes. And then because of that, I started writing all their names in my death curse books, and writing that I want them all to die, writing that they all pissed me off and made me angry, and that's exactly what I started doing. And eventually one day I thought of Damien, the crazy guy from Fort Myers who tried lunging me off the balcony, and I can definitely assure you I wrote his name in these books too, these death curse books. I definitely have wrote his name into these death curse books because I was pissed off about what happened. I'll have a picture of it in this video somewhere so you guys know what I wrote in the death curse book. I'm gonna blur out his name because his real name isn't really Damien. Eventually he got what he deserved, and that's what I'm going to be talking about in this episode of Joe Winko Talk. Now, I'm not sure how many of you people actually watch the news, but I live down in Florida, and recently, like literally a few weeks ago, Florida was hit by an extremely powerful Category 4 hurricane, dark orange on the Saffir-Simpson scale, Hurricane Ian, which ended up striking southwestern Florida as a Category 4 with 150 mile per hour winds. Now, because of the area I live in nowadays, I mean, I live in Florida, but I live in northern Florida and away from the water. I never worry about hurricanes anymore. I mean, that's one thing I'm glad about that I moved out of Clearwater. And at first I thought this hurricane was going to end up striking Clearwater, and I thought it was going to kill my adoptive dad's brothers, and I was actually hoping for that. I mean, I wasn't really thinking about it very much because I don't have to deal with my adoptive dad's brothers anymore, but I was hoping that it was going to kill my adoptive dad's brothers when it strikes Pinellas County and Hillsborough County. But then I thought about it again, and I actually have quite a few friends. I mean, not really that many, but there are a couple people who I actually do care for in Pinellas County. Very, very few. None of them are my adoptive dad's relatives, in case you guys are wondering. They're people I talk to online. But there's very, very few people, but still, they're there nonetheless. And I started thinking, you know what? I don't want this hurricane to hit Pinellas County, because I started thinking about them instead of my adoptive dad's brothers. And I got worried about them. I was like, I don't want those people to die. They never did anything to me. They don't deserve that fate. I hope they're okay. And I even messaged a couple of them on Facebook, and they were all telling me, oh, don't worry. We'll be fine. We'll be okay. And I was happy about that, at least. Then at the last minute, Hurricane Ian ended up slanting its path further east as it was coming up the Gulf of Mexico. It ended up striking Fort Myers, Florida as a Category 4 hurricane with 150 mile per hour winds on September 28th at 7:05 p.m., where it ended up killing at least 134 people, which is a pretty high body count for a hurricane, because most of the time when hurricanes hit, usually not that many people die in them because they see them churning out in the ocean before they officially make landfall. But I guess what was going on here was the people down in Fort Myers were unprepared for the hurricane because everyone kept expecting it to strike Tampa Bay and Pinellas County and Tampa, but then it ended up striking Fort Myers instead, which is why I honestly believe the death toll was so high from that hurricane. And we're going to be getting a tad bit off topic, but I just wanted to mention this real quick. Nothing happened to me during the hurricane. We got like a lot of wind and a lot of rain. It did come up like near my area, but I'm so far inland, I'm not going to get storm surge at all. And also, in addition to that, my vacation home that I'm living on is actually on a second floor, really. It's not like, it's not on a first floor, it's on a second floor. And I am aware of the possibility of inland flooding, but even if inland flooding did happen in my area, as I was kind of expecting it to, it wouldn't affect the space that I'm living in because I'm on a second floor, unless it was drastically high, which I wasn't expecting it to be. But I'm on the second floor, so I wasn't worried about anything. And I even remember as that hurricane was approaching, I read about this in a Facebook group, a Witchcraft Facebook group, that rainwater collected from a hurricane has very powerful and destructive powers to it, and it can be used in spells. So what I did while the hurricane was approaching the part of Florida that I live in, it was raining really bad, and I stood outside with a bucket and I filled it up with all the water from the hurricane. And I was planning on using it for more spells I was casting, because besides my adoptive dad's brothers, who I mentioned earlier, there's a lot more people who have pissed me off and who I want to die. I'm not going to lie, but it's true. And what I was going to do with that water was I was going to use it for more death curse spells that I was planning on casting. And I actually did end up using it for a death curse spell. Like that night, as the hurricane was going through my area, I heard the wind howling outside. It sounded terrifying, but I mean, I felt safe because I knew nothing bad was going to happen because it had already weakened by so much by the time it reached up here. Also because a lot of homes here are built to withstand hurricane winds. It's mainly the flooding and the storm surge that kills the most people during hurricanes. I actually did cast a death curse spell. It wasn't on my adoptive dad's brothers or the person I'm talking about in this video, but it was on one of my neighbors. And they technically are not my neighbors, but that's just the term that I use to describe them. They don't technically live next door to me. I just am trying to keep the identity of these people as ambiguous as possible, because if I told you exactly who they are, everyone would suddenly know, oh, that's who he's talking about. Oh, that's who he wants dead. And even though I'm not saying anything illegal or threatening in this YouTube video, I still think that it wouldn't be very good for the people who I want dead for these specific people who I want dead, these neighbors I'm referring to know that I specifically want them dead, because I feel like that would just lead to more drama, and I really don't want to deal with that. Not sure if that made sense to you guys, but I had a difficult time explaining that. You can blame my autism for it. But getting back to what I was saying, I did cast a death curse on my neighbors, and I've been wanting them to die, like, this whole entire year, really. Let me show you some pictures of the death curse spell I was casting on them. Got a picture of him and stabbed a bunch of nails through it. The blood on that picture is actually my blood. I used my diabetic poker to draw that blood, in case you guys are wondering. It wasn't like I was doing anything bad. I have to do that all the time to check my blood sugar. And then what I did was I added cinnamon, pepper, sealed it in a jar, and poured the hurricane water into the jar. The water I collected from the storm that was going outside, I wrote on the pieces of paper that I wanted him to die, and that I wanted him to be washed away by flood waters, because that's honestly how I thought that it would happen. For some reason, I was expecting an instant result with that death curse I put on my neighbor. I thought that the hurricane coming up, it would cause flooding wherever he lived, and that he would be washed away by flood waters, and that he would actually die, and I was actually imagining that happening the whole entire time, and I was expecting it to happen. I was expecting the next morning he wasn't going to be there, and the next morning he wasn't there, but he's not dead. He eventually did come back. All that happened in my area is I ended up losing power for 2 days, and it was not fun having power out for 2 days. I was pissed off by that, but eventually they turned it back on, and I was extremely happy about that. But that person who I put the death curse on in that picture is still alive. They didn't die at all. At least not yet, because the thing you have to remember about death curses, they don't always work right away. They always take a while, and another thing is they don't always work to begin with. You have to have like a lot of hate and a lot of anger towards that person for your death curse to actually manifest and for them to actually die. That's the thing. And to be completely honest with you guys, I have written so many names into these death curse books. I can't even keep track of all of them. I mean, because I write really small so I can fit like a lot of names on one page. Because I talk to a lot of people online, and a lot of people on Reddit, and a lot of people piss me off, and I just keep thinking, there's enough good people dying every single day. You see the videos of me leaving flowers by their graves, and it's sad. And it's about time that bad stuff happens to bad people who deserve it. So that's why I write all their names in the death curse book. But out of all names I've written in this death curse book, I can only confirm that 7 of them really did end up dying. And only one of them died the way I wrote for them to die in the death curse book. Because how these books work are, you write the person into the death curse book, you write I hate whatever name, and you write how you want them to die. Or you could just write their name into the death curse book, but I write how I want them to die. And only one of them really died the way I wanted them to. But the rest of them died differently from how I wrote them into the death curse book, which is still good enough. And as I was saying earlier, The one person who I put the death curse on that night as the hurricane was hitting, they're still alive. They didn't die at all. I was pissed off about that, to be completely honest with you, but I wasn't too surprised. I wasn't that pissed off, really. However, someone else who I put a death curse on did end up dying, and that was Damien. Because when I found out that this hurricane ended up striking Fort Myers, I looked it up online after they turned the damn power back on. I looked it up online and I read about what had happened, and it was disastrous. I completely underestimated how bad the hurricane was going to be. I mean, I knew it would be bad, but it was disastrous from what I've seen. Like, things were literally torn apart, and more than 100 people died. And I did not see that coming. I didn't expect that many people to die. But then I started thinking about Fort Myers, and I have some friends down in Fort Myers. I mean, some nice people I talk to online. You can call them friends if you want to. I checked in on all of them. They were all doing okay, and I was happy about that at least. But then I started thinking about the people down in Fort Myers who I didn't like. And there's really only one person in Fort Myers who I don't like that came to mind. And that was Damien, who I talked about in my Maniac in Miami episode of Joe Winko Talk. So I had his phone number. I still had it saved on my phone. I did a reverse lookup, got his last name, looked him up on Facebook, and I saw a whole bunch of people typing in, rest in peace, Damien, rest in peace. And I was like, oh my god, he died? And I was just thinking, what the hell? And it was all pretty recent, all the posts saying rest in peace. And then I just thought to myself, well, yeah, he died, but he probably didn't die in the hurricane, probably died from something else. And I'm not going to say his full name in this video because he has, unfortunately, this idiot, even though he was a psycho who tried throwing me off a balcony, has a lot of people who miss him and feel sorry for him. And he was really an asshole who was a psychopath, and I'm glad he's dead. He deserved it. I ended up looking him up online, and I found an obituary for him. The obituary said, quote unquote, that he died as a result from Hurricane Ian, and I was like, whoa, seriously? And I was honestly really shocked by that. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I wasn't sad. I didn't feel sorry for him for obvious reasons. But I was also confused, too, because, as I said, he lived in this really tall apartment building. And most apartment buildings, especially down in southern Florida, are built to withstand extremely powerful hurricanes. And I was just wondering, how did he die from Hurricane Ian? I mean, he obviously didn't evacuate, so he was in Fort Myers when Hurricane Ian struck. However, what most people are killed by during hurricanes are storm surge and the flooding. It's not really the winds that kill people, it's the flooding that kills people. But he was in a really tall apartment building, at least on the 5th or 6th floor, and I was wondering, how the hell did he die from that hurricane if he was that high up? Because that apartment building was pretty fancy from what I remember, the one in Fort Myers. It should have been able to withstand winds from a Category 4 hurricane. That shouldn't have destroyed the building at all. And I honestly don't know what condition the building is in. But I kept thinking about the time we were together back then. And like whenever I think of him, the major thing that I remember is that he got pissed off and tried lunging me off the balcony. He wasn't really talking to me very much while we were on our way down from Clearwater to Fort Myers. I was the one doing most of the talking because I was really excited to get away from my adoptive dad's brothers. Also, he was telling me that he likes to drive and go on road trips. Well, because I asked him that, definitely. And I was like, oh, we should go on a road trip together. I was talking about how we should go to Virginia and everything. and I was just rambling to him about a bunch of stuff and everything, which usually isn't how things go. Usually it's the other guy who does all the talking, but this guy was really quiet when I got together with him, and I was really excited to get away. I remember him mentioning that he was having problems at work and having problems with his job. There was some project that he had to finish that he was really stressed out about because he knew that he wasn't going to get it done in time. I remember him mentioning that briefly, and I forgot about that, but it suddenly came back to my mind. I remember him mentioning that. So I have a theory on what I think happened to him. I don't think he was living in that fancy apartment building when he died from Hurricane Ian. I think he had to move out because he couldn't pay his rent at all, because he wasn't able to do this project for his job, or he was probably fired for some other reason. And he probably had to move to a cheaper area, like an area that's still in Fort Myers, but not on the fifth floor of an apartment building, probably like down closer to the ground level. And when that hurricane made landfall, he was too stupid to evacuate, obviously, and he ended up dying from the storm surge. That's what I really think happened to him. Really. What do you guys think? Now, the thing is, this isn't the only time something like this happened. They were also my South Carolina BackStabbers, who were basically this gay couple. I mean, back a long time ago, I was worried about becoming homeless because my adoptive parents had me living in an apartment in Wisconsin, and they said that after my lease in Wisconsin expired, they weren't going to help me at all, and I was on my own. So I was looking for someone online to go live with. Basically kind of the same thing that happened here, a tad bit, but with some differences. And then I ended up finding this couple in South Carolina who said that they wanted me to come live with them, this gay couple in South Carolina. We used to video chat on Facebook Messenger a lot, and I wanted them to send me a bus ticket from Wisconsin to South Carolina. They didn't end up doing that, and they completely ghosted me and cut me off. Later on, my adoptive parents moved me down to Florida, where I'm living now, and I got back in touch with my South Carolina backstabbers soon after that, and they told me they didn't want me to come live with them because I don't suck cock or take it up the ass at all, and they told me that I was a selfish, fucked up individual. Fast forward a year later, they ended up dying in Hurricane Florence, and I did two videos about them, one of them about my South Carolina backstabbers, then the other one about what happened to them and how I reacted to it. In that video, it seemed like I was really sad while I was talking about it, but I honestly was not sad at all. I mean, they honestly deserved it. It was just gloomy talking about it, really, because I just kept thinking about the times we were talking on Facebook Messenger and how excited I was to meet them, and then they died. But I wasn't thinking hard enough about how they ended up stabbing me in the back and how they ditched me, really. But nowadays, that's all I think about, and all I think about when they got what they deserved. And that was before I started practicing the witchcraft stuff. That was back in 2018. I just wanted them to die, and I wanted them to get what they deserved. I wasn't even thinking about a hurricane. And here we are in 2022, another guy who literally tried killing me, throwing me over a balcony, also got what he deserved. He died from the hurricane. And that's exactly what ended up happening. He ended up dying from the hurricane because I was putting the spells on him and everything. And when you cast a death curse on someone, you're not really in control of it, honestly, to be completely honest with you. It's not like you're killing someone. It's more like you're asking the universe to take someone out for you. That's mainly basically what you're doing. And it's the universe who decides. And the universe decided that this man was no good and that he deserved to die, which is why he died in Hurricane Ian. And I'm glad he died in Hurricane Ian. And I remember I was talking on the phone with my grandmother about that, my adoptive mom's mother, and I told her that I wrote his name into the book. He ended up dying in Hurricane Ian, and at first she didn't remember exactly who I was talking about at first. At first she was saying, "Oh, I'm pretty sure what you wrote into your death curse books had nothing to do with what happened to Damien, with him dying in Hurricane Ian. I think you're just feeling guilty. And then I was just like, what? I don't feel guilty at all. No, I don't feel guilty. To be completely honest with you, and this is where things get gloomy and really sinister. I don't feel guilty at all. I feel good. I'm glad that he is dead. I'm glad he's dead because he had it coming. I honestly feel like I did cause him to die in that hurricane. Like, no, I didn't summon the hurricane. I didn't do any of that. I mean, I'm going to be getting to that later, but I didn't summon the hurricane or do anything like that. But I honestly feel like he's dead now because I believed. I believed in my magic. I believed in my friend's magic, my witch's friend's magic, who all were pissed off at this guy that he tried lunging me off a balcony. And I also believed in the power of the books. And he got what he deserved because of it. And I'm glad. I'm very glad. Because this person physically tried harming me, tried throwing me off the balcony, and karma came back and got him. But how do you guys think he died? I mean, I'm gonna have another poll on my YouTube channel and on Twitter for you guys to vote on, because that's the same thing I did with my South Carolina BackStabbers. I don't exactly remember what the results were. I should have pulled that up earlier, but I think what the results were for my South Carolina BackStabbers on how I think they died, everyone was voting that they probably died from flying debris, because the options were either flying debris, storm surge and flooding, or carbon monoxide poisoning. I just assumed that it was going to be storm surge and flooding. I'm not sure why everyone voted flying debris, because I even explained many times that most hurricane victims don't die from flying debris. They die from storm surge and flooding, and that's what I think killed them. I don't know why everyone voted flying debris. I mean, carbon monoxide poisoning, that was definitely another one. Basically, with carbon monoxide poisoning, when someone's really stupid and they want their power on, well, they're not stupid for wanting power on, but they're stupid for doing this. They put a generator in their house and plug things into it to keep their power running. However, generators produce carbon monoxide poisoning. There's so many warnings about that, but every now and then people are too stupid to listen to those warnings, and they end up dying of carbon monoxide poisoning. That happens pretty often, really. You're supposed to keep a generator outside your house, not inside. And it wouldn't surprise me if my South Carolina BackStabbers would have died that way. And it honestly wouldn't surprise me if Damien from Fort Myers would have died that way. Because the thing is, this guy was crazy, but I also feel like he was really stupid too. I mean, if you're gonna snap on me and take me down to Fort Myers, first of all, why are you even coming to pick me up if as soon as we got home you're gonna pull a 360 and send me home right then? And send me back to my adoptive dad's brothers right then? That doesn't make sense. When I was talking to him on Grindr, he seemed really excited to meet me and very interested in me, and I was excited to meet him. I mean, yeah, he was a tad bit nervous while we were driving down Interstate 75 to Fort Myers, but he didn't seem like too against spending a lot of time with me. Getting back to how this situation basically parallels the South Carolina BackStabbers, it technically does, really. Because if me and him would have hit it off very good, well, first of all, what I would be trying to get him to do is to move away from the coastline in Fort Myers. I try to get him to move further inland so we don't have to worry about storm surge from hurricanes, because that's where it's most dangerous, at the shoreline and the coastline. That's what I would have tried doing. But even then, I would have talked him into evacuating if that hurricane was coming. I would have been saying, you know what, this hurricane's coming. We better get in our car. We better go on a road trip somewhere. We cannot stay here while a Category 3 or 4 hurricane is going to come. Even while it was about to strike Tampa, because I think that's why so many people died in Fort Myers. While it was going to strike Tampa, the cone had it aiming at Tampa, But also, in addition to that, you have to pay attention to the areas around the cone, not just in the middle of the cone, but everything in the cone, really, which also included Fort Myers, which is why it ended up striking there. And I would have told him, we gotta drive up to Georgia or drive up to Tennessee. We can't be here when this hurricane hits. We gotta get the hell out of here. But because instead he tried lunging me off a balcony and kicking me out like some crazy person, he didn't have me there with him to tell him to evacuate, which is why he died. And it's his fault. He rejected me. I mean, he did more than just reject me. He tried killing me also. He rejected me and tried killing me, which is why he's dead. And you know, to be completely honest with you guys, I mean, I've been trying to find out where they're going to bury him or where they have buried him. I want to go to his grave, and I want to film a video of me leaving a black flower on his grave. Because if you guys seen my videos on YouTube of me visiting people's graves, the color of the flower I leave on their grave depends on the person. If it's a female who passed away, who I felt sorry for, I leave almost any color flower by her grave except for red and except for black and except for white. But any color besides red, black, and white, any color flower I'll leave by her grave to show that I feel sorry for her that she died. If it's a male who died, as in they're a child, not an adult yet, then I leave a red flower by their grave that's not a rose, but a red flower. But it depends on the circumstances, really. Like, if I find out their favorite color, then I'll leave their favorite color flower by their grave. But most of the time, I leave a red flower by their grave if it's a young male who died, who's not an adult yet. But if it's an adult male, then I leave a red rose by his grave, because I feel sorry for him that he died. And if it's someone who is missing, and they have, like, some memorial thing set up somewhere, then I leave a white flower by their memorial. White represents hope that they're still alive and that they'll come home safely. That's something my autism mind came up with. This is all stuff my autism mind came up with. However, if it's someone who I don't feel sorry for and someone who I'm glad is dead, then I leave a black flower by their grave because I'm glad that they're gone. And I haven't posted any videos like that yet of me leaving a black flower by someone's grave. But you'll definitely know because I already planned out how those videos will go. I was going to have a piano instrumental version of the song Therefore I Am by Billie Eilish playing in the background. Because when you listen to the piano instrumental version of that song, do 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 do. I mean, it sounds pretty eerie when you're hearing that on a piano, really. And it sounds morbid and dark and gloomy because that's mainly what it would represent. That's why I'm using it in a grave visiting video for someone I did not care for someone who I'm leaving a black flower by their grave, because I'm glad they're dead and I'm happy that they're dead. And I wouldn't be saying anything in the video. I would just be walking there and leaving the flower by their grave, and I'd just be walking away then, because I'd be glad that they're dead. And that's the kind of video I wanted to do for Damien. I was going to blur out his name on his tombstone and everything in case his family sees it and tries coming after me, because I don't want to deal with that, really. I mean, I already have enough people written to my Death Curse book. I mean, I'm running out of space in those 2 books alone. But that's what I wanted to do, to show that this person made me angry. I might have some narration to describe exactly who they were and what they did without mentioning their names. And that's the kind of videos I wanted to do for me leaving a black flower by someone's grave, really. I was also planning on leaving a black flower, doing videos of me leaving black flowers on my adoptive dad's brother's graves, because you never know, they could end up dying. You never know when someone's time is up. Or my neighbors who I hate so much, who I want dead, who technically aren't my neighbors, but oh, trust me, if they end up dying in a horrible accident, I will get on camera and I will tell you guys everything they did to piss me off and why I'm glad they're dead. However, I can't really do that while they're alive because I want to keep them as ambiguous as possible, and I just feel like if they found out I was posting online that I wanted them dead and everything, that it would lead to more drama that I don't want to deal with. But yeah, I already explained that. I also wanted to leave black flowers on the graves of my South Carolina backstabbers. They actually died in coastal North Carolina, but not very far from South Carolina. However, I have no idea where they're actually buried, despite them being dead for years. So that's basically it for this episode of Joe Winko Talk. I was kind of all over in my thoughts, but you guys should be used to that by now. I mean, you can blame my autism mind for that. But, it did kind of freak me out a bit when I found out that Damien had died from a hurricane, especially after I wrote him into my Death Curse book. It took a maddening long time for that to happen, but it shouldn't surprise me too much, because that's actually, I mean, out of all people who I wrote into the Death Curse book, that was actually the one person who physically tried harming me. So it makes perfect sense that he ended up dying, and there's other people I wrote in the Death Curse book who ended up dying too. I don't even think I wrote for him to die in a hurricane. I know I didn't write for him to die in a hurricane because I didn't think that would be possible because of the building he was living in. But I really do believe my theory is correct, that he lost his job, couldn't afford his rent because he didn't finish his project he was worried about. He was kicked out of his apartment probably, or had to move someplace cheaper. And then because of that, when this hurricane struck, he didn't evacuate and he ended up dying, and that's why he's dead. And I definitely do believe that my spells had something to do with that. And I definitely do believe that the other witches I was talking to online, my witch friends, I believe their spells had something to do with it too. And I'm glad. I feel like justice was finally served, which is absolutely true. Absolutely true. It's just like this one picture I made, and ironically, this is a tornado, not a hurricane. Karma is a slow-forming storm, but when it touches down, it tears shit apart. And hell, it was a slow-forming storm. This was way back in 2020. Fast forward to almost 2 years later. That's how long it took him to die. Jeez. But it is what it is. I'm going to have a poll up so you guys could vote on how you think Damien died. How do you think he died? Do you think he died from storm surge, or, which is most likely what he died of? That's what most hurricane victims die of. Do you think he died from flying debris, which I highly doubt, really, because during hurricanes, most people are inside the house. They're not going out. Or do you think he died from carbon monoxide poisoning? I mean, he was an idiot, really, but I'm not sure if he's that big of an idiot to have a generator on and to die of carbon monoxide poisoning. But it also wouldn't surprise me either, but I'm more inclined to believe he died from storm surge. But I'll have that poll posted on YouTube and on Twitter. And yeah, I'll have the results from my South Carolina BackStabbers poll on how you think they died in Hurricane Florence. If you want to watch more about my South Carolina BackStabbers, I'll have the link to their videos in the pinned comment of this video, so you guys can check those out. And I'll also have a link to my Death Curse book, the video I did when I got it in the mail from my grandmother, so you guys can check that out also. So yeah, that's basically it for this episode of Joe Winko Talk. Don't forget to like, don't forget to comment, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to like me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. Don't forget to vote in my poll. How do you think Damien died as a result of Hurricane Ian? And yeah, I wish him no peace in the afterlife, because that fucker deserved it. So that's basically it. Peace out, people.